Racist officer embarrasses black veteran, regrets it instantly after one sentence. The late July sun beat down over the town of Shreveport, Louisiana, heating the asphalt until it shimmered. On the corner of Red River Boulevard, a small group of people waited at the bus stop, their shadows long and restless. Among them stood a black woman in her early 40s, wearing a faded army green jacket, jeans, and worn leather boots. Her short-cropped hair showed flecks of gray at the temples, and a pair of aviator sunglasses hung from her collar. Her name was Serena Jameson, though nobody at the stop knew that yet. They didn't know she had spent over a decade in the U.S. Marine Corps, nor that she had once pulled her commanding officer out of a burning Humvee during a night raid in Kandahar. All they saw was a woman who stood tall, hands clasped in front of her, breathing steady, as if the heat didn't touch her at all. Across the street, a patrol car idled beside a hydrant. Inside, Officer Travis Bell, mid-30s, leaned on his elbow, chewing gum and squinting beneath his Ray-Bans. Bell had a reputation, smug, cocky, and always one push away from unnecessary escalation. He didn't recognize Serena. He didn't care to. He saw a black woman standing confidently, alone, in a predominantly white neighborhood, and for him that was enough to warrant attention. He stepped out of the car slowly, adjusting his belt, letting the sound of his boots crunching on gravel echo across the street. He crossed traffic with the swagger of someone who believed the badge gave him the right to question anyone, anywhere. Serena didn't flinch when he approached. She didn't look away, didn't shrink, didn't reach for her phone like the teenager next to her just did. Bell stopped 2 feet from her. "Ma'am, I'm gonna need to see some ID," he said, voice syrupy smooth but sharp underneath. Serena blinked once. "I'm just standing here waiting for the bus." Bell shifted, looking around like he was confirming some crime no one else could see. This neighborhood's had some break-ins lately. "Just being cautious." A white man in a golf polo looked up from the bench. "She's been standing here the whole time, officer. Ain't caused no trouble." Bell ignored him. "ID," he repeated, tapping the clipboard tucked in his belt. Serena slowly reached into her inner jacket pocket, pulled out her wallet, and handed over her driver's license. He snatched it like she'd been hiding it. "Serena Jameson," he read aloud. "New to the area?" "I've lived here 3 months," she replied. "Moved down to help care for my father." Bell whistled low, then held up her ID toward the sun like he was checking for invisible ink. "I'll be right back," he said, "just making sure this is legit." Serena nodded once, her jaw set. As he turned away, a whisper of conversation floated between 2 teenagers sitting on the bench. "Why's he messing with her?" "Because he can." Bell returned 3 minutes later, sunglasses now tucked into his shirt, revealing pale blue eyes that narrowed when he handed back the ID. "Funny thing is," he said with a smirk, "you stand real straight. Military?" Serena gave the faintest nod. "Retired. Staff Sergeant, 3rd Battalion." Bell laughed under his breath. "You know, some people come back from the military thinking they're better than everyone else." Serena's lips parted just slightly. "They expect people to treat them different, like the world owes them something," Bell went on, louder now, speaking not just to her, but to the people nearby. "But around here we all follow the same rules. Doesn't matter what uniform you wore." Serena didn't reply, not yet. Bell stepped a little closer, his voice dripping now with something more than arrogance. "You walk around with that stiff posture like you're still in charge, but you're not. I am." And that's when Serena finally spoke. One sentence that changed everything. I bled on foreign soil so people like you could keep pretending you're heroes." The words fell with the weight of a grenade. The teenager filming from the bench let out a stunned "whoa" and tilted his phone toward the officer's face. Bell blinked, momentarily unsure how to react. "What did you just say?" he asked, the smirk fading from his lips. Serena stepped forward, slow and deliberate. "I served my country with honor, for years. I've seen men like you scream at children, then run when the bullets came. You want to embarrass someone to feel important? Pick a fight you can win." The silence around them was suffocating. A woman passing by with grocery bags stopped mid-step. Bell's mouth opened, then closed. Behind him, another patrol car pulled up. The officer inside, a black woman named Angela Ricks, stepped out and took in the scene with sharp eyes. She recognized Serena instantly. They had served in the same unit for a year in Afghanistan. "Staff Sergeant Jameson?" Officer Ricks called out, walking up. Bell turned. Ricks nodded with quiet respect. "Didn't expect to see you back here," Serena offered a tired smile. "Just visiting my father." Ricks glanced at Bell, whose face had gone pale. "Is there a problem?" Bell cleared his throat. "We had a call about suspicious activity." "No, we didn't," Ricks replied. "Dispatch hasn't said a word." Bell's mouth worked silently. Ricks turned to Serena. "Let me walk you to your bus." They walked away together, leaving Bell standing on the sidewalk, eyes burning with a mix of embarrassment and fury. Behind him, the teenager's phone was still rolling. A voice on the video muttered, "Bro, just got schooled by a Marine." And by nightfall, the clip would have 300,000 views and a new title, "One Sentence That Shut Down a Racist Cop." Serena didn't smile as she got on the bus. She didn't need to. She had said her piece, and for the first time in a long time, someone like Bell had been forced to hear it. By the time Serena stepped off the bus in the Highland District, the clip had already begun making its rounds online. She didn't know yet. Her phone was still tucked away in her jacket, but a digital wildfire was building. Teenagers had reposted it on TikTok. A local activist group picked it up with a caption that read, "This is what calm power looks like." Onlookers who had stayed silent in the moment were now sharing their perspectives in comment sections like, "Confessions too long held in." But Serena wasn't focused on that. She walked past a row of aging houses with front porches that leaned just slightly to one side. Her father's home sat at the end of the block, shaded by a massive pecan tree whose roots had long since cracked through the sidewalk. She pushed open the creaky wooden gate and walked up the path. Her father, Walter Jameson, sat on the porch with a crossword puzzle and a half-empty glass of sweet tea. He was in his 70s now, lungs weakened by decades of factory work and a quiet life spent watching history repeat itself. He looked up as she stepped into view. "Took you long enough," he said, the corner of his mouth twitching. "Bus broke down 3 stops from here," Serena said. "Or maybe the universe wanted to make me late." Walter gave her a knowing glance, eyes narrowing. "You all right?" Serena hesitated, then, "Yeah." "Just had a moment with a cop, nothing new." Walter exhaled slowly, his expression hardening. "Same damn story. Different badge." They sat in silence for a minute, the kind of silence shared by people who didn't need to fill the space with words. Serena leaned back in the old rocking chair beside his and let the wood creak under her weight. "I told him 1 sentence," she said finally, "and you should have seen his face." Walter chuckled. "Bet you hit harder with that mouth than with a rifle." "I did today." Before either of them could say more, a loud ping echoed from inside Serena's pocket. She pulled out her phone. 37 missed notifications, 3 voicemails. Dozens of messages, and at the top, a link from an unknown number with the caption, "You went viral, Staff Sergeant." She tapped it. The video had been edited. Zoomed in, captioned, her face, her voice, that one sentence. "I bled on foreign soil so people like you could keep pretending you're heroes." The view count ticked up with every second. Serena stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she shook her head. It's out there. Walter didn't ask what she meant. He just leaned back, eyes narrowing. "You ready for the noise that comes with that?" "I've handled worse," she replied. "Bullets don't tweet." Later that evening, Serena's phone rang again, this time from a familiar number. Angela Ricks. "Hey," Angela said, her voice clipped and quiet. "You at home?" "Yeah. You might want to stay there." "Bell's pissed, not just at you, at the fact that he's trending for the wrong reasons." Serena didn't blink. "He brought it on himself." "I know, but people like Bell don't handle shame. They twist it. Make it look like they're the ones under attack." Serena could hear the tension in Angela's voice, a tightness behind the words. "You okay?" There was a pause. "They pulled me into the watch commander's office this afternoon," Angela said. "Asked why I didn't de-escalate the situation, why I let you undermine a fellow officer's authority." Serena sat forward. "You serious? Dead? You were the only one who did the right thing out there. Doesn't matter, Bell's already spinning the story. Says you were confrontational. That you refused to comply. Claims your body language was aggressive." "Body language?" Serena repeated, her voice low. Angela's voice dropped even lower. "He filed an incident report, Serena. It's official now. Says you were hostile and threatened him." Serena stood. "He's trying to rewrite what happened. I thought you should know before it gets worse." "Thanks." Angela hesitated. "I've seen this before. They'll bury the context, amplify the lie, then sit back and wait for public opinion to turn." Serena's voice was quiet, but it carried weight. "Then I'll remind them what the truth looks like." The call ended. Serena looked down at her hands. She'd faced insurgents, ambushes, roadside bombs, but none of those had ever looked her in the eye and smiled while lying. The next morning, she met with a local attorney named Grace Keller, a former public defender who had turned her attention to civil rights after years of watching systemic failures play out in courtrooms like tragic theater. "I saw the clip," Grace said as they sat in her office. "It's powerful, but it's also dangerous for you. Because it threatens someone's ego? Because Bell's not working alone. I've pulled a few threads, and this isn't the first time he's made up incident reports. Just the first time someone with a voice called him out in public." Grace handed her a folder, 3 cases, all dismissed. All involved black residents, all with eerily similar language in Bell's reports. "He uses the same phrases," Grace explained. "Aggressive stance, non-compliant tone, unprovoked hostility. These words are loaded. They don't just describe behavior, they manufacture threat." Serena scanned the pages. Photos, statements, names of people who hadn't gone viral, who hadn't had a crowd watching, who had no one to vouch for them. She closed the folder and looked up. "So what do we do?" Grace smiled. "We push back." "Not in court, not yet. First we gather. We bring those people together, their stories, their footage, their voices." You said one sentence that stopped a man like Bell cold. Imagine what a dozen stories like that could do. Serena sat back. Her shoulders relaxed, just slightly. "I didn't ask for this fight," she said. "No," Grace agreed, "but maybe you're the one meant to win it." Outside the office, the city continued as usual. Traffic lights blinked. Radios played. People laughed in cafes, but under the surface, something had shifted. The story wasn't just about a cop and a veteran anymore. It was about a system and the woman who wasn't afraid to stare it down. The morning air was thick with the scent of magnolia and exhaust. Baton Rouge buzzed like any other southern city waking up. Trash trucks groaned through narrow streets. Old men gathered on stoops to talk about nothing, and students stumbled toward school in clumps, earbuds in, eyes down. But inside a small community center on 4th Street, the real noise was just beginning. Serena sat in a folding chair, surrounded by a half-circle of strangers. Each person held a story, a scar, a silence that had lived too long without space to breathe. Grace stood at the front, clipboard in hand, the kind of woman who didn't command attention with volume, but with sharpness. Her words were careful, but her tone cut clean. "We're not here to start a war," she said, eyes scanning the room. "We're here to bring truth out of hiding, and sometimes that's even harder." To Serena's left sat a young man with short dreads and wary eyes. Jamal, a local EMT who had been detained by Officer Bell after trying to help a collapsed man outside a bar. Bell accused him of impersonating a medic. Jamal lost his job, got it back 6 months later, no apology. On her right was an older woman named Ruth, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her son had been stopped 3 times in 1 week by Bell and his partner for matching a description. The last time ended with a bruised cheek and a broken phone. They took turns sharing. The room swelled with frustration, quiet nods, the occasional scoff, and when it was Serena's turn, she spoke plainly. "I wasn't trying to go viral," she said. "I was trying to buy a drink and go home." Silence. Then Jamal leaned forward. "But you said something." Loud enough that it cracked through the glass. Serena exhaled. "I only said what I needed him to hear." Grace walked over and placed a small recorder on the table. "Say it again," she said. So Serena repeated the words that had started it all. And this time, when they left her mouth, they didn't land on just one man. They wrapped around every person in that room like armor. By the time they finished, Grace had 3 hours of testimony. Raw, unfiltered, names, dates, audio clips, cell phone videos, documentation, enough to construct not just a case but a pattern. Later that night, Serena sat on the edge of her bed, laptop open. Her inbox was a wildfire of news inquiries, requests for interviews, offers from national networks. But she didn't answer any of them. Instead, she opened a blank email. To Civilian Review at brjustice.org. Subject: Formal Statement from SSG Serena Jameson, U.S. Army. Return. In the body, she began typing, not as a victim, not even as a soldier, but as a citizen. "I'm submitting this report not only on my behalf, but on behalf of the others whose voices have been silenced under layers of official language and falsified accounts. This officer did not make a mistake. He followed a script, one I've now heard word for word from others. This is not about misunderstanding. This is about misuse of power. I am requesting a formal civilian oversight investigation." She paused. Then added a line, "You don't need my uniform to believe me. You only need to pay attention." She hit send. The next morning, the first real twist came. Angela called, her voice low and urgent. "You need to see this." Serena turned on the TV just in time to catch the 8 a.m. news feed. There, standing behind a podium with the city seal shining faintly behind him, was Officer Bell, clean-shaven, pressed uniform. A rehearsed humility in his tone. Last week's incident has been misunderstood, Bell said, carefully chosen words falling from his lips like pebbles into still water. My intention was never to escalate. I approached Miss Jameson with caution due to a report of a suspicious individual in the area. Her reaction was unfortunately hostile, but I regret that the encounter became confrontational. I have always served this community with integrity. Serena narrowed her eyes. And as a veteran myself, Bell continued, I take great offense to any implication that I would disrespect someone who served. Serena froze. Angela's voice cut in. He's claiming he was in the military. He wasn't, Serena said flatly. Grace called 20 minutes later. He's bluffing, she confirmed. Our PI ran his records. No enlistment. Nothing. His file's clean. But he's banking on no one digging. Then let's dig, Serena replied. That afternoon, Grace sent a press release to 3 trusted outlets. It included the body cam transcripts from previous incidents, civilian complaints, and a bold headline. Multiple residents accuse Officer Bell of patterned abuse. Now claims to be a veteran without proof. And as it turned out, that was the sentence that flipped the narrative. Within hours, the Baton Rouge Veterans Association released a statement. Officer Bell is not a member of our records, nor has he ever applied for membership in any capacity. A local radio host caught the scent of scandal. So he lied on live TV about being a vet. You don't just fake that. You don't throw that around for clout. The internet did what it always does next. They pulled old yearbook photos, found a video from Bell in 2015 hosting a Back the Blue fundraiser where he'd said on tape, "My cousin was in the Marines. I could never do it myself. Too much structure." That clip alone clocked over 1 million views in 12 hours. But the final nail came from a quietly shot video that surfaced on Twitter, filmed months before Serena's incident. It showed Bell confronting a delivery driver in a parking lot, screaming that he looked shifty. The driver, also black. Also calm, the same words, same tone. Same cop. And just like that, the narrative snapped. This wasn't about one sentence anymore. It was about the echo behind it, the years of silence, the pattern now too loud to ignore. Serena turned off the screen and stared out her window. The streets looked the same, but she could feel it. Something had shifted, and Bell, once untouchable behind a badge and a smirk, had finally found himself where no shield could protect him, under the weight of the truth. The following Monday, Baton Rouge's skies hung low and gray, as if the city itself sensed the mounting tension. It had only been 5 days since Serena's statement was released, and already her phone had become a battlefield. Journalists, activists, trolls, law firms, retired service members. The flood was relentless, but it wasn't until a call came from a restricted number that Serena realized how far this was going to go. "Miss Jameson," said a voice, crisp and official. "This is Captain Melissa Rhodes from the Louisiana State Attorney General's office. We'd like to meet in person. It's regarding your formal complaint against Officer Bell." Serena paused, surprised. "You're moving on it already?" There was a short silence, then, "Let's just say, the state's been waiting for a push." They met at a neutral site, a municipal building tucked behind a library in downtown Baton Rouge. The room was plain, the walls a dull beige, with one long table and 2 chairs facing each other. Captain Rhodes wore no badge, just a tailored gray suit and a gaze that didn't flinch. She wasted no time. "We've opened an inquiry. You're not the first person to complain about Bell, but until now, no one had enough documentation or credibility that couldn't be spun." Serena folded her arms, lips pressed. So it took a veteran with a public platform to make it real. It took a veteran who didn't back down after the noise died, Rhodes corrected softly. The department's internal affairs is stonewalling, but our team has a subpoena in motion for Bell's personnel file. Then Rhodes slid something across the table, a transcript, an internal memo dated 3 months earlier, detailing a prior warning against Bell for excessive language during a civilian stop. Serena read silently. Her eyes narrowed. And this got buried? It was labeled resolved with verbal counseling, Rhodes said flatly. Standard procedure for a department trying to keep its nose clean. Serena shook her head slowly. So it's deeper than him. We think so, Rhodes nodded. Which means we have to be surgical, strategic. As she left the meeting, Serena's mind reeled. She'd come here to report a cop for humiliating her. Now she was the reluctant spearhead of a case potentially pulling back the curtain on an entire culture of misconduct. That night she called Grace. I need to know everyone who came forward during our last session. I want to meet with them, not just for the investigation, for something bigger. Grace hesitated. Serena, you sure you want to take this on? You're not the department. You're not a lawyer. You're one person. I'm a person with receipts, Serena replied, and it's time they're seen. 3 nights later they gathered again, this time in the gymnasium of a local church that had quietly offered its space after hearing what Serena was doing. Chairs circled the center. Lights low, phones on silent. Jamal stood first. I just want my name cleared. I got my job back, but every time a new manager comes in, they see that report. The suspicion sticks. Ruth nodded solemnly. And they always use the same line. We're just following up. What they mean is, we still don't trust you. Serena stood before them all, a whiteboard behind her, marked with timelines and name tags. I'm building a formal coalition, she said. Every statement we collect will be anonymized unless you approve it. This isn't just about Bell anymore. It's about a system that enabled him. We're calling it the Resilience Project. Angela, seated in the back, raised a hand. Why that name? Serena's gaze swept the room. Because every one of us kept going. They bruised us. Shamed us, ignored us, but they didn't break us. That matters. The crowd nodded slowly. The silence wasn't heavy. It was solid, grounded. That same week, local news coverage shifted. The Baton Rouge Independent released a 3-part exposé. Headline, Pattern or Prejudice? Doesn't speak out against Officer Bell. The story quoted Serena's statement, included a timeline of his prior complaints, and most damning, revealed leaked body cam footage from 2 years ago showing Bell slamming a teen against a squad car after a stop for a missing bike report. The teen had been the wrong person. The clip was grainy, but the voice was unmistakable. You think you're untouchable? You're lucky this isn't the old days. It went viral within hours. Bell didn't appear at his usual post the next morning. The city buzzed. But the real twist came 2 days later, when the Baton Rouge PBA, the Police Benevolent Association, released a statement. We cannot, in good conscience, continue to offer legal support to Officer Jason Bell in light of recent evidence contradicting his public statements. That kind of distancing was rare, public, deliberate, strategic, and it sent a message. Serena watched it unfold from her living room, sitting cross-legged in sweatpants and an old hoodie, phone buzzing nonstop. Angela sent her a simple text. He's unraveling. And yet, even as the walls closed in on Bell, Serena knew something deeper. The system wasn't collapsing. It was adjusting, repositioning. She could feel it in the headlines that now centered her as the problem. Disgraced officer's accuser turns activist. Veteran pushing anti-police agenda? The twist wasn't that Belle might go down. It was that they'd try to paint her as the real threat. But she wasn't afraid, because the difference between noise and movement doesn't stop when the shouting dies. It just gets quieter, sharper. And right now, Serena Jameson was sharper than she'd ever been. The morning Serena Jameson walked into the City Hall chambers, Baton Rouge was buzzing with a different kind of energy. There were no sirens screaming through the streets, no protesters holding signs. Just a thick, quiet tension, the kind that sinks into your bones before a storm. The hearing was scheduled to begin at 9 a.m. sharp. It wasn't a criminal trial yet. It was an oversight committee session, the city's way of publicly appearing transparent while privately calculating damage control. But what made this one different was simple. The public was invited. And Serena had brought backup. The moment she entered the glass atrium, all eyes turned. She wore a tailored navy suit, clean white shirt, boots polished but modest. No medals, no banners, but her presence commanded the room more effectively than any uniform. Walking beside her was Jamal Jefferson in a gray sweatshirt, Ruth Delgado in a floral blouse with defiant red lipstick, and behind them a line of Baton Rouge residents, all of whom had submitted statements to the Resilience Project. Across the room, Officer Jason Bell sat stiffly in a dark suit, eyes sunken, fingers nervously tapping his thigh. His lawyer, Harold Pennington, a rotund man with expensive hair and a louder voice, glanced toward Serena with disdain so thick it could stain marble. They weren't here to confess, they were here to spin. Council member Ellis, a woman with salt and pepper hair and a measured tone, struck the gavel. This hearing is now in session. We will be reviewing community-submitted complaints involving Officer Jason Bell and will consider recommendations for formal disciplinary action. Serena's name was called first. She stepped up to the microphone, adjusted it once, and scanned the room. Bell wouldn't look at her, but that didn't matter. She wasn't speaking for him. She was speaking for everyone who had ever been made small in public and told to accept it. My name is Serena Jameson. I served 8 years in the United States Air Force, including 2 combat deployments. I hold an honorable discharge and a master's in clinical psychology. On March 14th, I was publicly humiliated, restrained, and accused of threatening behavior for the crime of walking while black and female. Pennington immediately stood up. Objection to the characterization. That hasn't been proven. This isn't a courtroom, Council Member Ellis reminded. Miss Jameson, continue. Serena nodded. I have submitted video footage, a copy of my military ID, and audio from nearby surveillance that captured Officer Bell's remarks. But this isn't about documentation. It's about normalization. How often does an officer use that tone? That posture? How many people here have experienced it and stayed silent? The room stayed still. Then she added, and when he pushed me and said, "Don't play soldier in my streets," I realized it wasn't just about me. It was about the message he wanted to send every time he saw someone who looked like me stand tall. The silence was interrupted by Ellis. Thank you. Is there anyone else from your group who wishes to speak? Jamal rose. He didn't look like a speaker. His jeans were worn, his voice was raw, but when he spoke, the room straightened. I got stopped last year for walking my dog without a leash. Bell slammed me against my own front gate, said I was aggressive. My ribs were bruised for 3 weeks, no charges filed, just fear left behind. Then Ruth. He said I was trespassing outside my own cousin's house. I told him I was waiting for her to come home. He told me, "You people always got an excuse." I thought about complaining. But I didn't think anyone would believe me until Serena stood up. And so the stories came, one after another, some shaky, some furious, but each one layered the truth like bricks on a wall too solid to ignore. Bell sat frozen, jaw clenched. His lawyer leaned in to whisper, but Bell brushed him off. His face was twitching in a way he couldn't hide anymore. The real twist came not during Serena's statement, but afterward, when Councilmember Ellis announced that the committee had received an anonymous file from inside the Baton Rouge PD. It was a set of internal logs, redacted reports, repeated use-of-force complaints, audio clips from dashcams that never made it into evidence, and, most damning, a memo from 2021 in which Bell was formally warned about using racially coded language during stops. A supervisor had noted, "This officer demonstrates a pattern of antagonizing black civilians." Pennington tried to protest. "This is hearsay. It's inadmissible. Who even leaked this?" But Ellis ignored him. "This isn't a trial. This is oversight, and it seems your client's record tells its own story." The chamber buzzed. Council members exchanged glances. Camera phones clicked from the public seating. Serena didn't flinch. She simply watched Bell shrink, slowly, silently. But what hit the hardest came next. Councilmember Brooks, a former police officer himself, looked Bell square in the eye. "You looked a decorated veteran in the face and told her she didn't belong on your street. Tell me, Officer Bell, what street do you think she belongs on?" Bell's mouth opened, then closed, and stayed that way. No spin, no response, because the truth had finally spoken louder. Later that evening, Serena stood outside the chamber steps with Jamal and Ruth beside her. Reporters swarmed, but she raised her hand once, and they stopped. "One sentence," she said. That's all it took for him to lose control. And that's the power we all carry when we stop letting fear decide how we speak. And with that, she turned and walked away, not out of defiance, but with purpose. Because the fight was no longer about defending herself, it was about leading a city into facing what it no longer could deny. The next 48 hours moved with a strange rhythm, calm on the surface, volatile underneath. Serena had returned to her apartment with dozens of voicemails waiting, most supportive, some laced with venom. She ignored them all. She knew the real storm hadn't hit yet. The oversight hearing had changed the air in Baton Rouge. Local stations ran split-screen broadcasts, one showing Serena's speech, the other showing Jason Bell sitting silent as his record was read out loud. But while Bell's public image crumbled, something more dangerous began to brew online. A short clip, just under 14 seconds, circulated that night, cropped tightly, grainy, muted. It showed Serena turning to Bell and saying something. The caption? "This is why they hate the uniform." She had never said that. But facts mattered less than framing. Right-wing blogs picked it up first, twisting the hearing into a witch hunt, claiming that Serena had turned a personal vendetta into an attack on the police. The phrase "dishonorable veteran" trended briefly on a fringe platform. Serena's full military record, once praised, was now picked apart by people who had never worn a uniform. Eli Calder was the first to call her the next morning. "You need to see this," he said. "They're building a counterstory." She already knew. She sat in her living room, a thin light falling across the floorboards, her fingers scrolling through a feed that looked nothing like the city she had spoken to 2 days ago. There were comments like, "Just another angry black woman who thinks being a vet makes her untouchable," and "If she's so calm under pressure, why's she always filming herself?" The real twist came that afternoon when the police union released a formal statement defending Officer Bell. We stand behind Jason Bell as an officer who has served his community for 17 years. In light of recent public spectacle and media manipulation, we caution against hasty judgment. Officer Bell deserves due process." The words "public spectacle" hit Serena like a slap. They weren't just defending Bell, they were painting her as the antagonist. The soldier who stood straight was now the agitator. The veteran was now the threat. That evening, a friend from her old unit, Lieutenant Raymond Boone, called her from San Diego. "You want me to speak out?" he asked. "No," she said, her voice low but firm. "Not yet." He paused. "You sure?" "I'm not here to defend who I am. I'm here to remind them what they've become." Later that night, Serena met with Eli in the back corner of a quiet downtown cafe. He had a folder under his arm and a look in his eyes she hadn't seen since the first time they'd met. Restless resolve. "I dug up Bell's transfer files," he said. "He requested this district." "You know why?" She shook her head. Eli pulled out a document and placed it between them. It was a handwritten note from Bell's personal application. One line stood out. "I prefer patrols in high-density areas. You get real policing done there." Serena blinked. "That's dog whistle language." "Not just that," Eli said. "Check the precinct's internal incident map." She leaned over as he flipped the page. Every single complaint, everyone, comes from the same 3 neighborhoods, predominantly black, lower income, and all suppressed under the same claim. No body cam evidence available. She exhaled slowly. So he knew where he could operate without oversight. And the department let him. They sat in silence for a beat, then Serena whispered, "It's not just about Bell anymore." Eli nodded. "You ready for that?" "I didn't come this far to sit quietly while they rewrite me." The next morning, Serena posted a statement, not through a press release or a media agent, but a plain-spoken letter published on her own blog, which she'd barely used since leaving the military. No dramatic graphics, just words. "I served my country with honor. I spoke out because silence has never protected us. And if my calm in the face of aggression is threatening to some, then perhaps it's not my tone that needs examining, but the system's reaction to it." The post went viral within 6 hours. But it was what happened next that shifted everything. A whistleblower from the department, anonymous, using a secure channel, leaked footage from a squad room meeting 3 weeks before Serena's incident. In it, Bell stood before a group of officers and said jokingly, "These activists think they can film us into submission. Just wait till one of them tries me. I'll have them in cuffs before they hit record." It was chilling, not because of the words, but because of the laughter that followed. Dozens of officers, no one objected. No one walked out. The public had their twist now, not the edited clip. Not the distorted veteran narrative, but proof on tape that the problem wasn't just one man, it was a culture. That night, as Serena scrolled through comments again, something felt different, not less hateful, but more fractured. More people speaking up, more asking questions. And in the middle of it all, Serena Jameson stood, not because she had planned to be a symbol, but because in a system built to break your silence, speaking even one sentence of truth could be an earthquake. The sentence Bell would regret forever wasn't shouted or forced. It was calmly spoken, a mirror he couldn't avoid. And now, the cracks were spreading. Serena stood in the mirror of her modest Baton Rouge apartment, fastening the last button on a crisp navy blouse. The light from the early morning sun slanted across the floor, golden and warm, but her chest felt heavy, like armor. In the past few days, the pressure had grown sharper. Threats had flooded her inbox. Talk radio hosts painted her as a danger disguised in discipline. Police unions doubled down. But the public, they were no longer silent. A growing tide of residents began to demand answers from their local officials. A petition calling for a federal investigation into the Baton Rouge Police Department had reached over 300,000 signatures. Local pastors preached about institutional repentance. A group of veterans, black and white, marched through downtown holding placards that read, "Silence isn't neutral," and "Honor doesn't fade under skin." Still, inside the department walls, a counter-movement was building. That morning, Officer Jason Bell stood behind closed doors with a team of his longtime allies, men who had climbed ranks beside him, who had laughed at his jokes, silenced complaints, and now felt cornered. "They want blood," Bell muttered, pacing the length of the room. "They think throwing me out will save the rest of them." Captain Maurice Lanning, nearing retirement, crossed his arms. "It won't. They'll come for the rest of us next. This is about reshaping the whole damn narrative." Bell stopped pacing. "Then maybe it's time we shape one of our own." A few heads turned toward him. "What are you suggesting?" Bell leaned in. "She's not just going after me. She's going after the department. If we expose something, anything, that calls her credibility into question, it flips the whole game. You want to dig into her past?" "Not just dig," Bell said. "We plant." The plan was reckless, dangerous, but desperation made men bold. By midday, anonymous sources started feeding fringe news sites with fabricated claims, alleged disciplinary actions during Serena's deployment. A falsified accusation from a fellow soldier buried in redacted documents resurfaced. One outlet ran the headline, "Serena Jameson, decorated or deceitful." She saw it. Her phone buzzed repeatedly. Friends texted warnings, but Serena sat still, unmoving at her desk, eyes locked on the screen. This wasn't her first war. It was just a different battlefield. Eli called. "They're trying to drown you in noise. They think if they muddy the waters enough, people will forget where the fire started." "Then it's time we burn brighter," she replied. She didn't wait. Serena gathered her documents, official commendations, deployment records, letters of honor from her commanders. She scanned everything into one massive digital archive, time-stamped, verified by JAG contacts from her time in the service. Then, with quiet precision, she scheduled a live stream. No flashy graphics. Just a black screen with white text. "The truth, tonight, 7 p.m. CST." She spoke for exactly 8 minutes. She didn't shout. She didn't accuse. She told her story again, from the street where Bell confronted her, to the sentence that had shattered his authority. "I never intended to become a symbol," she said, her voice measured but edged with exhaustion. "I just refused to be erased. And I won't allow you to erase my record either." She showed the receipts. Every file, every citation, every signature. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Mainstream outlets scrambled to retract the smears. The Department of Defense issued a rare public clarification. "Lieutenant Serena Jameson served with distinction. There are no disciplinary records associated with her file." But the moment that turned everything upside down came just hours later, when a rookie cop named Nathaniel Roy, just 24, released his own body cam footage from a training session led by Bell 6 months prior. The footage, raw and uncut, showed Bell joking with officers in the locker room. "You know what's the best part of a pat-down? If they twitch, you get to say aggressive behavior works every time on them." Them. Everyone in the room had laughed, but the rookie's face in the video didn't move. And now, 6 months later, he had released it. "I didn't speak up then," he wrote in his statement. "But seeing Serena Jameson speak truth into a crowd and never flinch made me realize silence is complicity. It broke the dam." Other officers began stepping forward, quietly. One shared a screenshot of Belle messaging a private group chat. "She needs to be made an example of." Another revealed internal memos that showed complaints being discarded with post-it notes reading, "Handled verbally." Eli was stunned. "You gave them permission," he told Serena that night. "Not because you asked, but because you went first." She didn't answer, but her eyes glistened. Not with victory, but with the fragile weight of knowing her survival was inspiring others to finally speak. Meanwhile, inside the department, panic spread. A high-ranking lieutenant resigned. A city council member publicly called for an emergency session, and for the first time in a long time, the mayor stopped hedging and declared, "We will not allow corruption to wear the badge of our city." Jason Bell, he doubled down. The following morning, Bell went live on a conservative podcast, angry, unfiltered, daring the department to punish him. "I've served this city longer than she's been out of high school. Let's see if their so-called justice means anything." But as he spoke, comment after comment flooded the stream. "We saw the video. You lied." She stood. "You cracked." Bell's voice faltered. He ended the stream early. The tide had turned. Yet Serena knew the fight wasn't over. Not until every shadow was accounted for. Not until the badge protected the innocent, not the insecure. Not until truth stopped needing defense. That night, she stood by her window, phone in hand, watching the lights of Baton Rouge flicker in the humid dark. And then she opened her camera and recorded one sentence. Not for them, but for herself. "You tried to define me with lies, but I speak with proof, and the world is listening now. Would you like me to continue with Chapter 8? The morning air outside City Hall was humid, thick with anticipation. News vans lined the sidewalks. Reporters with notepads and wireless mics milled about under the early sun. Baton Rouge was wide awake, and every camera was aimed at the front steps where a podium waited. At 10:02 a.m., Serena Jameson walked through the front doors flanked by two attorneys and Eli Calder, her unlikely ally turned brother-in-arms. She wore a simple black blazer over a pale blue blouse, her posture upright, her face unreadable but calm. As she reached the podium, a flurry of camera shutters sounded like distant rainfall. She paused. She didn't glance at the crowd. Instead, she looked skyward just for a breath, as if remembering someone. Then she spoke. "When I first came back from deployment, I thought the hardest thing I'd ever do was adjust to silence. No sirens, no orders, no gunfire. Just the quiet." Her voice rang clear and even, slicing through the noise. But silence is dangerous when it means complicity. And in my country, in this city, too many people in uniform have used silence as their shield. She raised a printed copy of the city's internal review. "This report confirms what you all now know, that I was unlawfully detained, falsely accused, and publicly humiliated by Officer Jason Bell with full knowledge and passive complicity from others in the Baton Rouge Police Department." She let the words sit. Then, softer but firm, she added, "I didn't come here today to relive my trauma. I came to make sure it doesn't become yours." Behind her, a large screen flickered on, displaying a timeline of the case annotated in red. Footage played, brief but damning, showing Bell pinning her against the wall the moment her ID was ignored, the smirk of arrogance as he dismissed her record, and then the quiet power of her standing without flinching. In the crowd, some gasped, others just nodded, already knowing it in their bones. Jason Bell was not present. Hours earlier, it had been confirmed he'd tendered his resignation after being served with formal misconduct charges. His pension was under review. His name removed from the department's wall of honor. But Serena's battle was never about him alone. As she closed her statement, her eyes scanned the crowd, not with anger, but with intention. To every black woman who's been told to stay quiet, to every veteran whose service was reduced to suspicion, to every citizen who's been treated like a threat before being treated like a human, this story isn't mine anymore. It's ours. Applause erupted, not the polite kind, but a thunderous standing surge that echoed down Main Street. But even as flashbulbs flared and chants started to form, Serena stepped down, avoiding the spotlight. She preferred real work over headlines. In the days that followed, two major developments unfolded. First, the Department of Justice announced a civil rights investigation into the Baton Rouge Police Department, citing Serena's case and the testimony of others who had come forward in her wake. Second, a bill began circulating in the Louisiana State Legislature, the Jameson Accountability Act. If passed, it would require independent civilian oversight of excessive force complaints and mandate the release of unedited body cam footage within 48 hours of any use of force incident. Meanwhile, Serena returned to the community. She didn't open a nonprofit or start a media tour. Instead, she quietly launched an after-school leadership program for at-risk girls, especially children of veterans, calling it Stand Tall. One afternoon, weeks later, she sat on a park bench outside the center, sipping iced tea from a plastic cup when a young girl no older than 12 approached her. The girl had braids and wore a backpack with patches from military bases across the country. "Miss Jameson?" the girl asked softly. Serena turned, smiled. "Yes?" "My mom showed me your video. She said, 'This is what strength looks like.' I just wanted to say, thanks." Serena blinked. The words hit harder than she expected. She leaned forward, her voice gentle. "You know what strength really is?" she asked. "It's remembering who you are when the world tries to tell you you're not enough." The girl nodded, then turned and ran off toward the playground, her backpack bouncing with each step. Serena watched her go, and for the first time in a long while, she felt something deeper than vindication. She felt legacy. That night, a final video went live on Serena's YouTube channel. A quiet, direct monologue, no fancy edits. Just her face against a dark backdrop. "I stood my ground. I told the truth." But the truth doesn't live in courtrooms or headlines. It lives in all of us. So if this story meant something to you, don't just remember it. Share it, teach it, speak it. Her eyes held steady on the lens. And if you ever feel alone, just know someone's already walked the fire, so you don't have to walk it barefoot. She looked down, reached for a letter, and held it briefly to the camera. Caleb's letter, slightly wrinkled, now framed in soft glass. Justice isn't loud. Sometimes it whispers. Make sure you're listening. If Serena's story moved you, don't let it end here. Like, share. Subscribe. Be the voice that breaks the silence.